Well, what's up, Colliders? Welcome back to The Collision Live. Daniel here, as always, joined at the desk by the full moon to my werewolf curse, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Oh, well, it's good to be doing the live stream when we normally do it.
Yeah, this feels weird. We're doing our Tuesday noon live stream at noon on a Tuesday. If you guys have been keeping up with our show, things have not necessarily gone as planned. The last couple of weeks, we've been experimenting with different times, different days.
Unintentionally.
Yeah, unintentionally, but hey, it's been fun. So we're back in our groove. But what's up? This is a crazy week just on the global scale. A lot of sobering, serious stuff going on. It's always a crazy week in culture and just in life. It's been a crazy. I had a cockroach attack me this morning when I was getting ready, coming out of the shower. So it's just been one of those days, one of those weeks. So
it's a lot going on, a lot to process, just sort of globally this week, and it was, I don't know. Other than that, I mean, it's just kind of been a mostly normal week. Carrie, my wife, is still very much sick. Not at all, but the pregnancy sickness is not at all abating. So that's been fun to just continually deal with.
Those kids get born, they grow up, and Sam's daughter made us cupcakes this morning.
Yes,
so just remember that
the collision is powered by.
This is sponsored by sprinkled cupcakes.
Which were delicious.
Which were delicious. So a couple things we want to kind of jump into, some topics, kind of more general topics next week, not super newsy as far as like pop culture stuff, but just sort of looking at some areas that as Christians we should kind of be aware of, I think, as far as how to engage with culture, how to navigate it, how to process it, affirm the good, condemn the bad, and just ask good questions about this world that we've been placed in. The first one, that, it's been a while. Let's just talk about bad stuff. This is one of Sam's favorite topics.
Finally, get to the good stuff on here.
Yeah, we've had too much good stuff. It's time to delve deep into the bad. And by the bad stuff, I kind of mean like what I call like the big three of just profanity, violence, and sex. That's kind of when you think of movies and people talk about, is it clean? Is it a good movie? Is it okay for Christians? For the most part, I've found in my experience, like that's what they're talking about, the big three.
Yeah.
They're asking you, is there violence, profanity, or sex?
Worldview aside, like I want to know like what's the content in this thing.
Yeah, and even the and again, I'm not throwing stone. We do it actually in our collision reviews, but a lot of like reviews, especially from a conservative or Christian kind of perspective, a lot of their like emphasis is helping people know what's, is there bad stuff in it? Is this a movie? Before you take your kid, you want to know how many, if they're going to see something or hear something that's going to, send them home from the theater saying words that you don't want them to be to be saying. So what do you think about that? Because there's different ways we can approach this and kind of ways to navigate it, but just sort of on a general level, like what do we do with bad stuff in movies?
We fast forward through it.
We hit mute.
And look away. No, I mean, all joking aside, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to our conversation about this, just as far as like the rating system goes, and how often that's just used as a shorthand to say, well, should I or should I not, watch this movie, or is it good for my kids or whatever? And I think oftentimes that again just misses the sort of the bigger picture of what this movie or show is about. And so I think we do make decisions on it sort of based on like what's the point of the movie maybe, and like how does it fit into the plot of the movie or fit into the story of the movie, and I think we make allowances based on that versus just like it's just a movie with just tons of profanity because why the heck not? And like
it's kind of, it becomes an easy there's an easy standard or gauge or tool to like make decisions on, like a rating system. Like it's just sort of, well, if it has this stuff, then it's bad. If it doesn't have this stuff, then it's must be fine for Christians.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, obviously it's more like immediate on the surface. It's easier to see. None of that gets into just like the worldview or, hey, this has no, profanity, but, it spends most of its film, really deconstructing religion and framing, some of that stuff.
Yeah.
It takes more work to navigate, and it's not as easy to see like
Well, and it's also not as like necessarily readily available information as far as just like, is this like, there's not many reviewers, I think, like sort of breaking down the worldview of film. Maybe there are, but I feel like it's more just like, is it cinematic? And if it's, a conservative review is like, what's the content going to be like? And not so much like this is really pushing a certain agenda or has a message that could be dangerous to young people or what have you. And so I think that kind of information seems to be a bit more nebulous and like, well, it's, it's not just like good worldview, bad worldview. It's just sort of like, well, here's the story it's telling, here's the angle, and that information I think is kind of harder to come by than just like, yep, it's got 10 F bombs in it, and somebody's head gets blown off, and so
not gonna watch. And I guess that is probably the, I don't think, I think the content, just so we're clear from the start, Christians should be asking about that stuff. They should be keeping aware. I've shared before here on the Collision Live about kidsinmind.com. It's sort of framed for kids, but it's a helpful tool for anyone. I don't know if it's run religiously or whatnot, but it just breaks down, generally a couple of days after the film comes out, but it breaks down the content in quite big detail. And I often check that before I'm going to go to see a movie in a theater or something, just so I know. So that is a question. It's not the only question,
right?
There is worldview, but when it comes to the, but we should navigate through it. And I'll admit, like, I'm pretty conservative with how I like what my not tolerance but allowance maybe for bad stuff. Like, I'm not one that has much of a stomach for just films that filled with profanity. I don't do just graphic violence, especially horror movies. Especially conservative when it comes to like the sexuality and stuff. I think that's of the three probably the biggest one. So, but having said that, I think sometimes because we've talked before, we tend to like simplify, try and reduce everything down. I don't know, and maybe you can tell me I'm wrong, but I feel like we tend to treat it almost a little too simplistic. That like, well, violent, like these three things are just bad. It's the bad stuff, and if there's any of it in any form, in expressed in any way in any movie, then it's clearly inappropriate for Christians to. Kind of in a very legalistic sense. Like, what do you?
Yeah, well, I think that the clearest maybe pushback against that to say that, if it has any of these things in it, it's not worth watching or you shouldn't watch it. I think the clearest sort of rebuttal to that, I think, would be sort of war films, and maybe, well, let's just stick with war films for now. But those, especially World War II, depictions of the atrocities of the Holocaust and all of these just horrific things that happened in wartime. I think there is a benefit to seeing just how horrible that was. And there's a recent movie about World War I, which gets a lot less like publicity, and it was just such a horrific war. But I think there is a benefit to seeing the horrors of war on film in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be okay with. And I think that's something where it's like, well, like how are you going to just sort of like whitewash the horrors of war and still make a sort of compelling story about someone's heroism or what have you? And so I think there are instances where some violence or some profanity is going to be needed just because they're trying to show this is how.
Yeah, they're dealing with.
This is how it happened, and it's again like there are. I think there are workarounds for some of that stuff too. Like, you don't necessarily have to be just like, you don't necessarily have to show everything, but it's like, because like I think want to give a sense of.
Because Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, kind of was like a war. I think I know when it came out, people were like, I think it was like a PG-13 film, and people were like, how can you even make a movie about war and he did it because he just focused on other stuff and like, so it's not like you necessarily have to, but I think, not like every film, but I think there are films that the whole point is to really immerse you in like in a certain situation or kind of mood or experience. And I think there are times, in my own way of processing some of this stuff, like where that becomes appropriate. Not that you want to just, as a viewer, as a Christian, like, I just watch films all the time.
Yeah.
All of it is just super depraved and like depravity and violence and swearing. Like I love that stuff. Like, you don't do that. I think that does.
Yeah.
The Bible speaks about just sort of guarding your heart and what you kind of letting what you let in. Eventually kind of manifests itself. So it's not like a habit kind of thing, but
right.
But there are times when that kind of material is, I think, beneficial for, and I think even it's the Bible, like all the big three, the profanity is debatable. Whether, I know some people make a case that some of like the disciples or even Jesus uses words that would be almost like equivalent to profanity in our day. I don't know enough about the original languages to know that, but especially like the sexuality and the violence, like the Bible,
it's pretty
filled
brutal.
With that. Like there is stuff that I don't want they don't put in my 6-year-old's picture story Bible, like the tent pegs being hammered through heads, and I think the reason it's in there is because it's revealing human nature, it's revealing sin. Like you have like incest and like you have crazy bestiality. Like there's stuff in there, but it's not handled in like a vulgar, like it's not trying to be vulgar and like edgy, like something like the most recent Suicide Squad movie, where it's just like, hey, this is rated R, we're bad, we're saying bad words, this is a naughty film. Like that's different to me than like a film that is just sort of giving an honest depiction of a very gritty subject.
Right, and I guess that maybe is sort of a somewhat clean line to say, like, I think when you veer into just the vulgarity for vulgarity's sake, that seems like an obvious place where you just say, yeah, that's not worth viewing. Whereas if you're telling a story about a horrific event or a horrible person, like maybe there's a bit more of an allowance for some of that stuff. Again, if it's handled in a way that's not like glorifying the vulgarity of it, then it's trying to tell an honest story about this person or this event or what have you. So I think it's more obvious when it's like, this is just sort of a film to celebrate all the vulgarities that you can have in life, versus just, this is a story of this person who was a horrible person.
Well, it's like PG-13 movies famously, they have one F-bomb allowance, so they always use it. Like they don't need to use it. It's not integral to the plot. It's just, we got one, we got to throw it in here, and it's always an out of place, awkward use. But yeah, it's just sort of being vulgar for vulgar sake. And before we and then we can jump over to our next section. But the verse that, again, it's not speaking specifically about entertainment. They weren't writing about Netflix and what to watch at the movie theaters, but I think one of the guiding verses that I come back to a lot as far as these sorts of questions is Matthew 10:16, where it says, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. I take that just think, don't just sort of reduce things to be simplistic. It's not, you're not going to lose your salvation because you were watching a gritty film that happened to have some profanity in it, but at the same time maintain innocence. Don't just sort of, hey, it's just movies, man. They don't impact me. I can watch whatever I want. It's not real. Guard your innocence, guard your holiness, while being thoughtful about it. So again, let us know, you guys, if you guys, if you're a parent or just someone that's sort of come up with your own standards and stuff as far as what you watch, how you decide what to watch. We'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah.
So jumping to the next thing, we have pop culture news. So we have a couple things that I noticed out on the internet this week as far as pop culture. I don't know if you saw the Star Wars Visions trailer. Did you see?
No,
I think it just dropped this morning. Oh. This is again, it's an anime Star Wars show. They announced it back when they announced like that they were making 1,000 Star Wars movies.
The next 800 Star Wars films.
So they announced this, and they hadn't revealed what it was, and I still don't really fully understand what it is. But this is 7 kind of Japanese anime studios that are giving their take on Star Wars. I think it's like new. It's not like redoing existing Star Wars stories. It's like new stuff, but in sort of this anime kind of Japanese art style. And I've shared before, anime does not do it for me. That I don't, if you like it, that's awesome. I don't, but this looked really cool. It looked like a different take. It's a different way to kind of to view a lens the 3 Star Wars through.
And of course that's like, an homage, I guess, to the homage that Lucas was doing.
Yeah,
you
because
know,
so much of
so
the
much
original was
taken from
was
a lot
based
of,
on these like old samurai films.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it fits.
I'll have to check
so
that out.
I think it'll be on Disney Plus. I think they should do this like short little films, not like a full movie or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
Free Guy. Haven't been able to see it yet. Haven't been able to do a review. I want to. A lot of people did see it because that movie's done really well at the box office, despite all the COVID stuff. And Ryan Reynolds, the star, just announced that there'll be a sequel. So I guess I got to make sure I see the first one so I can review the second one. Speaking of sequels, Cruella, the movie that no one was asking for, is going to get a sequel that no one was asking for. Apparently, it made money. I'm not sure. Maybe some of you out there went and saw it, so we can blame you for getting a sequel to that.
But why did it make money?
But why? So who knows what will happen with that? One thing I just came across in the comic book, again, I'm not super well versed in like the comic book lore, and we don't want to go super into this. Maybe this will be a topic a different week. But Robin, as in Batman and Robin, in one of the most recent,
Robin laid an egg.
apparently, this came out. There's debate whether he's kind of where on the LGBTQ brand or logo what letter he identifies with, but he's been kind of working through that in the comics. And we put this, I think, on the screen. You can see the page where they're kind of dealing with this. And we've kind of talked before. My opinion on some of this stuff is that in a world where Christians can make faith-based and push kind of messages and stuff, there has to be, it's okay for people to tell other stories.
Yeah.
I think they have every right to make a story like this. But I do put it up, and I wanted to put up the slide, because it's just an example, again, though, that especially like things like comics or things that people are like, oh, that's just for like young people, that's for kids or something. It's picture books, which again, it's not. But it's, these aren't. They're a lot more. Some of this art, entertainment. It's not just kind of punch, kick. Like they're dealing with cultural issues and kind of deep stuff.
I mean, it's another form of storytelling. So like, it's not just going to be like punch, kick.
Yeah, like it's getting deep. And again, I think as Christians, I think to be consistent, you have to allow a world where people can tell from different worldviews. But at the same time, you also need to be aware of what's out there and kind of have that dialogue through that. And Jeopardy got new hosts. I know I'm not a...
Yeah, I saw that. I forget who
2 hosts. I don't watch Jeopardy. My parents, that's their thing. They watch it all the time. I don't think you can't replace Trebek. But they have 2 hosts, and I've seen mixed opinions. One of them is one of the girls from Big Bang Theory, who I believe is a professing Christian. So she's be interesting to have her on there. We'll see if she hosts well.
This next phase of Jeopardy will be interesting to see how.
Yeah, see if that ends up kind of petering out. We'll see if it survives in the post Alex world. So the next topic for us we can kind of jump into. This is one of the projects. I'm a writer. I get to do some different writing book projects. One of the ones I've been working on lately is contributing to a study Bible. And I got my PhD in aesthetics and the arts. That's sort of I'm sort of the art guy, so that I get called in to do things on the arts. And I was brought into this study Bible to kind of walk through and kind of give notes and insights into like the aesthetic dimensions of the Bible and kind of the way God uses aesthetics and art and sort of walking from Genesis to Revelation, just looking at where He does that. And it's been amazing. Obviously it's not all new to me. I've studied this stuff, but doing it all in like a kind of intensive, sitting at my desk working for hours into the night, has this sort of reminded me again just how much from Genesis to Revelation, God is a God of stories and symbolism, and so much of what He does involves metaphor, and so I thought that I think relates to just story. It's like why. God, when He's going to communicate his revelation, like why is he using stories and symbol? Like why isn't He just laying it out like some instruction manual?
Yeah, where's the spreadsheet? That's what I want to know.
Sam wants his Bible like spreadsheet.
Yeah,
Excel.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to like that's for whatever reason, however we got this way, like we relate in stories and visually, like we're very visual people. Now, obviously, like some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, if that's the right word, or people learn in different ways. But I think at the end of the day, like the things that stick with us are like the photos, the pictures, the video, also the stories. And so I think since as far back as humanity can remember, like we've been telling stories, and I think it makes perfect sense for God to interact with us in story form. And you can look back at sort of the arc of all of the Bible and see the story of God's redemption of humanity, and then it's just filled with stories of people that God uses over and over again, and so I think every aspect of it is story, both on the macro and the micro sense. And so I think, of course, God would intervene in our lives in a story format, and I think that's like, it's sort of it's just cool to see that He does that, and it's not just like something that doesn't really make sense trying to like force its way into our lives, but it's like it actually makes perfect sense.
Well, it's kind of to me it's a validation. Obviously, as human, as Tolkien would say, sub creators, we're not God. So like this is God doesn't necessarily mean well, if God does it, we're just like. But I think there is a validation for that when it came time for God to communicate kind of deeper spiritual truths, he the primary way he did that was through imagery and visual kind of art and stories. I was thinking this, obviously Jesus in several of the Gospels, it's clear that, it says he spoke to them in parables. He did not say anything to them without a parable. When he's walking around preaching, he's really he's like a traveling storyteller. He uses visual illustration, like with the fig tree or with the temple rocks. Like he was appealing visually, not just through words. The Bible itself, when God gave the Bible, 40 to 60% of the whole Bible is narrative. Most of God's kind of special revelation is through story. And the one that kind of got me really thinking lately, man, if we can throw the picture back up that we had, this is from the temple. This is when Jesus, when he kind of breathes his last breath on the cross and he dies. The Bible says, the sky darkened and like the veil tore in two. Which is the veil. It was symbolic of sort of separating man, imperfect, sinful man from the Holy of Holies, from God, sort of in this sort of symbolic way to keep us from going into the Holy of Holies. And I don't know, we did this verse at church a while ago, and I've been thinking about it, like, why did God tear the veil? Like it's, like obviously, the significance of what Jesus did, it represents that, but like it's like God has like a flair for like the dramatic, that like why did he darken the sky and like tear the veil? Like what do you think? Like what benefit, or what, like why would he do this sort of visual dramatic thing right at one of the most significant moments in like human history?
I mean, I guess maybe the simplest answer is just be for significance, like for emphasis on the significance of what just happened. And I think again, it goes back to that desire for narrative and for story. And so for him to do that, it's like sort of putting that exclamation. It's the walking away from an explosion moment, I guess, if it were to be a film, like, it's like
slow-mo, like,
like he defeated the enemy. It's like, you didn't have to blow everything up at the end, but
he didn't even look back.
Yeah. Didn't even flinch. So I think it's sort of, not to trivialize it, but it's like, sure, it could have just passed without any notice, but I think this was the most significant act that God did in humanity, and so I think he wanted to mark it in a significant way. And I think the same can be said for the star over Bethlehem. It's like he could have just, I mean, like he told the shepherds, it's like, I mean, did there need to be the star that like these wise men saw from way far away, and like, okay, we're gonna go over there and see that, and like that seems so much, like it just seems so extra, right? Like it's just, so why go to this length to like play out this drama, if as it were? And so I think it's just, that's kind of in keeping with what he did. I mean, the same with like the burning bush, like all these other things.
Yeah, even like the Lord's Supper. I guess like he's sort of like, he's trying to kind of mark this monumental occasion of what he's about to do.
Yeah,
he has his followers do what I kind of call like a divine drama. Like you're doing this sort of symbolic thing in remembrance. And I think you're right. I think God marks, whenever he's doing something big, he tends to mark it somehow that's visual. Like I think like the tearing of the veil is is really like a work of art. Like it was a symbolic kind of work of art before he tore it, so representing separation.
Right.
And God just sort of comes in and like, the second edition, the revised version, like, he tears it and now it represents something different. And I think it's a cool thing. Did he need to do that? Like, did Jesus' death, was that not going to save us from our sins? Of course not. Like, you didn't need to do that. But I think it shows that God cared to kind of help us understand what was going on.
Yeah, and it shows that he knew how dumb we are sometimes. So it's like, I'm going to do this thing, and then I'm going to do these other 4 things that are just going to point back to that thing that I did, just so you know, like, yes, that's what I did. And so, like, I'm going to give you all these other markers. And I think it's the same with just the story of Israel. Like over and over and over again, he gives these visual markers throughout their history, because it's like, you're dumb and you forget stuff. And so I think even in our own lives, like, I think it's important to have some sort of even physical marker when God does stuff in our lives, because it's like you can look back and say, okay, yeah, that was definitely something that God did. Because we forget, because we were dumb sometimes. And I think it's easy to just be like, well, was that just a feeling? Or like, you could think back on it, maybe just sort of explain it away or whatever. And I think God likes to do things that are like, no, like you can't unsee this, or you can't ignore what I just did here, because like I did it in such an elaborate and like impressive fashion.
Yeah, and again, like I said, we're not God, but I think there's a place for like Christian artists and stuff to, not that we're marking in the same way that God does, but just visually communicating significant things that God has done.
Yeah.
I think, God set the template for that sort of how the best way to communicate these like intangible spiritual truths. I think as Christians, we can kind of carry on that, obviously, prayerfully and with care. But let us know if any maybe favorite moment in the Bible that's visual, or way that God just shows his crazy creativity and artistry. Obviously, I'd love to hear some of that, and maybe I'll steal your material and throw it in my Bible and do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we move on, is there a particular instance of that? I guess the veil would maybe be your...
Yeah, that's one that...
Having gone through the whole Bible now and picking out all the symbolisms and stuff, like, would you say that's your favorite or most significant symbolism that he does in Scripture, or is there another one?
Like maybe whatever the most recent one that I've read is tends to be my favorite. I think I said like Lord's Supper. Baptism's another one that it's just like this divine drama that we do that I think is powerful. It's a symbolic thing, but it's not diminished in significance because it's symbolic. Because the water doesn't have supernatural powers. But yeah, it's crazy. Read the Bible through the lens of kind of God's creativity, and it's just all over there, just showing that. And I think if you're a creative person, then it can be encouraging to you. So anything this week at the Collision, we should be having a new article coming out later this week. Kind of the follow-up to my Affirming the Gospel and Secular Pop Culture. I follow up on that and kind of look at some of the ways that you can do that. Kind of find, I know I've shared that that's coming, but the article is done, just needs to get edited and all that. But so stay tuned for that. Maybe I'll be able to get a free guy review, just depending if I'm able to catch that movie this week or not. But anything stands out to you this week? Anything final, profound word for us?
Looking forward to checking out those anime Star Wars.
Yeah, go check out the trailer. Let us know if you guys are excited for that. Maybe it will win me over to anime just in time for the Lord of the Rings anime movie coming out next year.
Awesome.
But thanks for joining us, guys. It's nice to be back on a Tuesday at noon.
At the right time.
And fingers crossed, we'll be back next Tuesday at noon. Hope you'll join us, join the conversation. If you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video on Facebook or to YouTube, wherever you're watching us, and just sort of join with what we're doing at the Collision. But have a great week, guys, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.